This is the Council's 8th work session, in which we will review the County Executive's proposed general plan, HOCO by Design. The proceeding this evening is a hybrid meeting, which is being held in person and via WebEx teleconference. It is also available to the public via video stream online on the County Council website. Today's session covers Chapter 4, County in Motion, and Chapter 11, Implementation, as well as Route 1 Corridor Transportation Policies and Actions. The Council will host a third public hearing on September 20th at 7 p.m., and an additional work session may be held on September 27th at 6:30 p.m. A complete calendar of Council meetings regarding the general plan can be found on the Council's website at https://cc.howardcountymd.gov/home/general-plan. At this time, I'm going to do a roll call of the council members. Vice Chair Young?
Here.
Dr. Jones?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Mr. Youngman? Here. And Ms. Walsh will join us as soon as she can. We will now proceed with our agenda. Turning to the HOCO by Design core team, we look forward to hearing about County in Motion. And please remember to use your microphones.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having us here this evening. As you said, this is our 8th and final work session for the main components of the plan. The next work session will be to discuss any amendments that are coming forward. I'd like to introduce our team for HOCO by Design. To my left is Jessica Bella, our Deputy Director, and then Kate Bollinger. And then to my right is Mary Kendall, the other Deputy Director in DPZ. As well as virtually, we have Kristen O'Connor here, and our consultant, Matt Noonkester, is here joining us this evening in person as well. And some of our partner agencies, we have Bruce Gardner with Office of Transportation, and Chris Jagarapu from Department of Public Works as well. And then Jeff Brona, who is our DPZ research, is virtual. So thank you again, and since we have such a long, lengthy agenda to get through this evening, I'm going to turn it right over to Jessica, who will be presenting to you County in Motion and the Route 1 transportation.
Hello all. I will try to move as efficiently as I can through this PowerPoint to leave as much time as possible for questions. I am so happy that we are taking our final work session to cover the topic that really connects all of us together throughout all our many different communities, as well as to the region and the nation. So the County in Motion chapter provides a high-level overview of the county's existing transportation system, the evolving trends and factors that will have and will continue to shape it, and the investments that are needed to achieve both our transportation and overarching policies goals that are outlined in the HOCO by Design plan. Which leads us to being able to understand, what do we mean when we say transportation system? This is essentially everything. It is both facilities like roads, bike lanes, sidewalks, and transit, as well as services. So anything that you need in order to get where you need to go. And although the general plan provides the high-level policy goals, it's really implemented through functional plans like our pedestrian and bicycle master plans, our award-winning complete street policies, programs, as well as area-specific planning documents. And obviously there's an inherent intersection between land use and transportation policies, which means we'll also be making updates to our zoning, subdivision, and land development regulations in order to achieve the goals that we outlined in this chapter. So I don't think it's a secret to say that travel in Howard County right now is really dominated by automobiles. But there's very much a need and a desire that we heard from the community to see enhancement in our public transit system and to make sure that that's providing equitable access to jobs, services, and amenities. Our existing transit is inadequate, especially we're hearing from business owners and managers that they are struggling to have their staff be able to get to work with the limited and infrequent stops that they have in that transit system. And there's a strong link between housing and transportation, and our past and current land use patterns really were not designed to support non-automotive travel or a robust transit system. The county has made many strides over the last several decades to improve this, and HOCO by Design continues that effort, comes up with several policies and goals and strategies for continuing the efforts. So, as you know, we had a very robust public engagement process as part of this plan. Here's a selection of different comments we received related to transportation. So, starting with one of our priority issues, which is essentially maintaining what we already have. One of our big challenges in the next 20 years is prioritizing limited funding and making sure that we are sufficiently budgeting for system maintenance, particularly because we have changing obligations within that system as a result of new engineering and environmental practices. It will also require us to regularly evaluate the maintenance needs and make sure that we're matching those to available funding. Transportation projects, if you know from your work on the capital funding, is a very long lead time. And combined with high variability in funding that's available, we can often see delays in seeing the projects come to fruition. As a result of that, there have been several studies to help us identify best practices to make sure that we are ensuring project delivery in a timely manner. And we have developed certain policies and actions to do this. Some of our policies and actions related to that effort are developing a risk-based asset inventory, developing fiscally unconstrained plans so that there is a pipeline for all projects, even if they are unfunded, and making sure that we're considering equity emphasis areas when we're prioritizing the maintenance of our existing system. We will touch on that further in the following slides. So, in addition to maintaining the system that we have right now, we also need to look at the safety of that system and how it is serving all the users who are on it. In 2019, we adopted Howard County's Complete Street Policy, and that was part of the continuing efforts to improve safety and make sure that everyone can get where they need to go in whatever mode they are choosing to travel in. And although the county is among the safest jurisdictions in our state, we still need to reduce the number and severity of crashes that we see. And there is a focus we have on the Strategic Road Safety Plan, which was completed in 2020 to help us move towards this goal. So I mentioned earlier that we have, complete streets policies, as well as the design manual update. We have Walk Howard and Bike Howard plans to work towards multimodal safety. Those are really about identifying ways to improve conditions for people who are walking and cycling, and making sure that we can do that through targeted investments. As part of the Complete Street Policy, we also adopted an equity emphasis area index, and this is really just a tool that helps us figure out where should we be focusing efforts to make sure that we're equitably kind of working on projects and implementing our Complete Street Policy. The index that was developed is based on the Baltimore Metropolitan Council methodology. It takes into a variety of factors from poverty to transit dependence to disability in order to score census tracts, which is what has generated this map. I do want to note that obviously where people live and their situation is a fluid situation, so we're going to see this map change over time, and we should be updating it to make sure that we're reflecting what's actually happening on the ground. So the policies and actions here that focus on preventing and mitigating the most severe types of crashes for all types of travelers are really called for in our Strategic Road Safety Plan, our Complete Streets Policy, our Walk Howard, and our Bike Howard plan as well. And we really want to make sure that we're working towards the implementation of those. So I started this presentation talking about the fact that when Howard County was first built out, it was very much focused on mobility and sort of getting people in cars where they needed to go efficiently. But we've been working towards an evolution of that focus towards access. Because right now what we have is barriers, where the way we have built our environment and the way we have invested in the past has created barriers so that people cannot get where they need to go if they don't have access to an automobile. So that is one of the major focuses and evolution that we're making in our system. We are seeing a lot of trends, evolving trends in how residents move in automobiles. We note that county residents drive more than their regional counterparts, and partly due to the limited amount of non-vehicular facilities that we have in the county, which our plan supports expanding, as well as the amount of time that people spend in their vehicles. We are looking at various studies and projects to improve this, and that is why we are constantly monitoring our conditions. So when we're talking about people bicycling and walking, we also need to talk about transit and its role in multimodal access. It provides access to jobs for people, and it's really about making sure that we're delivering the transit system efficiently, frequently, and that it's reliable. When those three things are not occurring, people who have the option to not take transit choose not to take it, which means that undermines the ability of the system to work for people who do not have that choice. Unfortunately, regional transit is limited in the county. Transit access is really through the regions through MARC and the commuter bus system. The service is really limited to AM and PM peak times of commuting patterns, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but people seem to be working all the time, which means that they're not always traveling in the morning and the evenings, and they need to be able to have transportation systems that work for their schedules as well. So we are going to continue to track capacity issues on the Camden and MARC line. What also influences that is the density of the land uses near MARC stations and making sure that our land use policies will let us invest in a way that will support investment in transit. So there are 4 policies that comprise the mobility and access topic, including closing mobility gaps and improving access to jobs and housing and services, advancing our transportation projects, making sure we're working with our regional partners, delivering improvements so that we reduce the reliance on automobiles, and improving travel reliability for everyone. Earlier, I talked about how difficult it is to deliver transportation projects and that it seems like these take a long time to bring about. Partly that is because they take a long time to plan, design, construct, and the process for that is very complex, especially because we have county roads and state roads. So there's a lot of coordination. And we will dig into this a little bit later in the presentation, but particularly this is evident on the Route 1 corridor where we're not seeing the progress that we want to see for the projects we've identified in that area. So the policies that we have are really about refining the process and making sure that when we take a project from concept to actual implementation, that we're seeing it be more seamless and hopefully be able to deliver those more cost effectively, more efficiently as well. And this is sort of the thing that we're all living through right now is that technology doesn't slow down. Advancements don't stop. And so we have a lot of emerging trends happening, particularly in the transportation world, that we are monitoring. Autonomous vehicles, we need to continue to monitor their impact. And we note that there's also micromobility technologies like e-scooters and bike sharing that have already become part of the transportation network in Howard County, but should be explored a little bit more because they didn't quite get off the ground given our land use policies. And we still have that challenge in Howard County of that first and that last mile connections to support other kinds of transit services. And then we'd be remiss if we did not acknowledge that our transportation system, particularly the nation as well as our local regional focus on automobiles, is a major contributor to climate change. and air quality that directly impacts all of us. So there is a section in the County in Motion chapter that speaks to the role that transportation plays in climate change and air quality, as well as solutions for reducing emissions and improving air quality by shifting how people travel, as well as working towards less vehicle miles traveled for people for all the trips that they have to make. So even for those who still will need to rely on their vehicles for their commuting patterns, we want to make sure that we're providing the correct infrastructure and investments to allow their local short-term trips to potentially happen over a less amount of time or through alternative modes of transportation. And we have to make sure that we're investing in new systems that support changing technologies. So our electrical vehicle charging infrastructure is something that we need to start considering, and the impacts for land use and delivery of those. So this slide goes over the different policies and actions that we're looking at for parking, land development requirements, design standards, asset management approaches, for both a resiliency standpoint in terms of emerging technologies. We call for supporting installation of EV infrastructure in both the public and the private setting, especially for residents or commercial property owners who have shared parking lots, to make sure that the connections are getting built there in a way that supports electric vehicles. On the equity side, we have policies to improve air quality, emphasizing communities that are most threatened by air pollution, and giving consideration to subsidy programs so that underserved communities could access low-emission vehicles, bicycles, and scooters. So turning now to our transportation investment priorities, which is our last topic in the County in Motion chapter. I think it's first important to acknowledge that the county's major corridors are generally built out as far as their size and configuration. And while we recognize that on-wheel travel is expected to continue and that it will likely be the dominant mode of travel in the county in the future, there is a growing desire and need to shift direction towards making sure that people who are not wanting to travel in their vehicle or do not have access to a vehicle have the means to get where they need to go safely and efficiently. And that means that there is an opportunity to shift some of our trips away from vehicles for people who would rather take a different system. So this is our transportation investment maps. Includes projects the projects that are selected are based on travel trends and forecasts, prior identified projects, and also any plans that were identified in our functional plans. And the next slide. And then, as you know, our different road systems, we classify them differently. So these are the functional classifications for the roads. So coupled with design guidance in our design manual, they really kind of determine the ideal right-of-way and road improvements that we're trying to achieve. Because our system is mostly built out, a lot of that is going to be about retrofitting to match it, and also making sure that we're implementing our complete street policy redesign. So these are the policies and actions associated with that transportation planning. We're going to develop a countywide transportation plan, make sure that we're looking at everything comprehensively. We're going to continue to use our functional road classification map. We're going to implement transit service recommendations through our functional and master plans, and we're going to continue to work on the multimodal transportation improvements. And we thank you for bearing with us as we separated out transportation from the Route 1 corridor plan. And we wanted to cover it tonight, given that we're discussing all of that. So I'm going to briefly summarize what we discussed at our last work session. If you can remember, a whole 7 days ago, that we discussed how the Route 1 corridor preserves Washington Boulevard as an industrial employment corridor. We're aiming to grow the industrial and manufacturing base through redevelopment and reinvestment. And we're also targeting redevelopment and place-taking in our mixed-use walkable districts, and as well as preserving our historic communities that are there. And then the section that we're going to go over tonight is really about talking about how we need to promote safe and efficient travel in the corridor by focusing on infrastructure improvements. So Route 1, if you look at it, it's really, the area that we're talking about is everything to the east of Route 95, which is a very large portion of the county. This section of the county is characterized by both its residential and industrial land uses, and those two uses dominate the corridor today. Route 1 is bisected by other major roadways like 32, 175, 100. It exists in close proximity to I-95. So the land uses and the major transportation roads that we see there combine to make Route 1 a vital link in both our local, regional, and national transportation system. But we also know that there's quite a bit of conflict that happens between the land uses that are there, as well as the different needs that arrive and the conflicts that happen. So we have to navigate those. So Route 1 was really, once again, automobile-centric built environment. It doesn't have a lot of robust and connected infrastructure for walking and biking, and that directly impacts the safety and our ability to make public transit useful and an effective option for people who would like to take it. Howard County has a strong history of working to improve these conditions, particularly focusing on intersection safety improvements and trying to plan for enhanced connectivity and access. And so our shifting approach is to really focus on the site conditions that contribute to crashes and prioritizing countermeasures to address them before the incidents actually occur. So considering that what causes crashes and where do those conditions exist elsewhere. And that allows us to kind of work on planning for how to meet all the different conflicting needs of the different users. And so we've refocused on realizing we really need to separate bicycle users from those heavy truck users on this corridor. And some of our major policies and goals work towards that. So our policies and actions are about implementing the safe system approach to the transportation corridor and making sure that we are doing kind of surgical improvements where they are needed and getting out ahead of issues before they occur. So I'm going into further elaborate on the walking and cycling needs in the county. As I said, we had previously been working on this. HOCO by Design continues those policies. And we have projects identified in our functional master plans, as well as our complete street policy and design manual changes that will help us implement these. We want to focus on those projects with the greatest impact, the ones that will deliver the most amount of access and connections through missing gaps, but also need to recognize that there are smaller projects that really improve the everyday experience of people in the corridor, including someone who's just frustrated by that curb cut that doesn't quite work for them, and how that can make a big impact in their daily living. So the policies and actions to support walking and cycling are really about expanding our investment, making improvements in the connections, particularly around activity centers, which can really provide a lot of the critical links and missing gaps for where people want to go and the wider systems that they're trying to access throughout the county, including our trails and parks. And then we have, as we said, we have those regional trails. We just need to help people get to them. And so we move on to public transit in the corridor. So as I said in our County in Motion Transit section of this presentation, we do have public transit, but it's not as robust as we would like to see, and partly that's just because we don't have the kind of land use that provides the critical mass and connectivity necessary to justify those greater investments in the transit system. So our policies and actions related to that are that we want to prioritize improvements in the Route 1 corridor, especially around activity centers where we might be able to start developing that critical mass and evaluate increasing the transit service in line with those investments as we see them come to fruition. So the next slide, please. Okay. No problem. That gives me a chance to pause. So, as you heard, I've focused heavily on walkability and bikeability and the need for people who are not in vehicles to access sites, but we also need to make sure that vehicles continue to be able to get where they need to go, both residents as well as commercial vehicles. And some of the issues that we have in the Route 1 corridor are the fact that it was really designed on a model where every individual parcel has direct access onto the corridor, and that affects how people use the actual Route 1 corridor, as well as the kind of the amount of land and space that we dedicate to that model of access. So some of the strategies that we're looking at is how can we more effectively and efficiently use land to give access to the adjacent uses on the corridor, while also potentially rededicating space that we have in the right-of-way to achieve other goals for those bicycle and pedestrian improvements, green space, and potential stormwater management facilities. So these are some of the policies and actions that we have in Route 1. We want to make sure that what we are doing in the corridor really supports the economic powerhouse that is the Route 1 corridor for those industrial uses, but that we balance that against the needs for local access and mobility, as well as the region's need for that corridor to function and support the economic engine house for moving freight, through the entire region. So, and then as I discussed, we also want to make sure that we're reducing congestion levels on Route 1 through the access. And then you're getting a little bit of deja vu here because Route 1 has similar issues to the rest of the county in terms of project delivery. Both large-scale and small-scale projects are difficult to implement. They have a pretty long time period because they are complex, both in procedures for developing them and getting approval for them, funding them, but also the physical constraints that we have in a corridor that is mostly built out to the right-of-way width. So we're kind of recommending taking a different performance-driven approach, working with both our adjacent local jurisdictions and the state of Maryland to improve processes for delivering these projects. And we always want to keep in mind emerging trends to ensure that we are proactively planning to adapt, to change and capitalize on opportunities that these may bring when we're looking at sort of the different trends in vehicle power. Sorry, my brain is tapping out at this point. So, which is good that we're coming to the end. So our policies and actions for this means that we are trying to make sure that we are coordinating our transportation planning efforts, that we are anticipating what's going to happen in the future, and that we're delivering our projects. And I am so thankful to finally get to our key takeaways for this, which are that maintenance is foundational to the transportation system. We need to make sure that we're maintaining what we already have. Safety for all transportation users, from vehicles to pedestrians to bicyclists, is really about anticipating and preventing and mitigating conditions that could lead to unsafe conditions. And we need to shift our focus from the single-user auto-centric model of the past and improve access and safety for all modes of travel. That we can see improved implementation timeframes by changing our project delivery model. We need to plan for continued changes in technology that will directly impact the transportation system. And we will be doing all of this in an environment that is mostly built out, where major investments will need to deliver on our economic, environmental, land use, and transportation goals all at the same time. So I'll leave you with where we started. Transportation is what connects all of our communities to each other and the wide world, and that's why it's critical that we have to get it right.
Thank you so much. That was great. So I think the rotation is starting off with me today, and I just sort of wanted to start off where I left off last time, which was on the shared driveway, the cross-access agreements, and shared parking districts potential. I understand the what. I think what I'm missing is the how, which I understand is the next step, but I just want to make sure that when we're voting on things here, we understand what the hows can be.
Right. So shared parking, particularly in activity centers, it's really about assessing all the different land uses. And when we have in our in our parking manuals, we kind of say, these are the general land uses. This is our understanding based on past trends of how much parking they're going to need to support them. But we can also see that different land uses have different needs at different times of day. So rather than saying every land use needs to build to the maximum need that it has and having those spots stay empty for parts of the day where they're not in demand, we can see in a specified area what's the demand of all the different land uses and make sure that we're sort of the Venn diagram model, that make sure that we're building to the Venn diagram and making sure that we're only building the amount of parking that we need to satisfy all those uses when it's most needed.
The only follow-up I had is just, especially some of the shared parking doesn't seem like it's working out as well as we would hope in downtown Columbia. It's just not as easy, right, to move through it. But is the difference between that and this proposal that it would be a new one? So if you have a new activity center, then you are more likely to have a singular landowner with multiple uses, or multiple landowners that are all coming together under the same project, so kind of have to work together.
I think it depends on sort of the model. So my understanding right now is that we essentially have two different models for calculating shared parking. We have more of a general model that sort of takes these are general land uses. And then for downtown Columbia, we have a more sophisticated model. It's much more complex. There's a lot more complex uses happening in downtown Columbia. It's also in development. So it's very much in transition. So where the parking lots are that are serving the different uses is sort of getting moved around as it's being redeveloping. I think that's really discussions that need to happen towards implementation and figuring out, well, what's the vision for Route 1, for the different activity centers? They're all unique. They'll have a unique mix of uses, and figuring out what is the best strategy to kind of deliver on the policy goals that we have in the plan there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Young?
So my questions, I think, are primarily for Mr. Gartner regarding transportation demand management plans. I'm bringing you to the table. Good evening. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I'd like to get an overview. I think there's two transportation demand management plans. Is that correct?
Yes, there's two areas in the county where those plans are effective, and the work on those, that's Maple Lawn and downtown Columbia.
And what are those transportation demand management plans supposed to accomplish?
So they're basically supposed to address how the areas can thrive with things other than the individual automobile. So we're trying to get the residents there, the businesses, to be able to accommodate and use bicycles in transit and the microtransit more easily. So there's a lot of efforts that we've been doing during COVID in terms of outreach and getting that messaging across. And then we've also been working with for instance, the Downtown Columbia Partnership. I believe the executive director of the partnership was invited and might be here online virtually. But we've engaged with a consultant to identify best practices and how we can basically have the buildings that are downtown engage with their residents on how they can utilize those modes more effectively. So one of the things that they do is they've been submitting plans, transportation demand management plans, as part of the complexes. What we've identified is some of those really haven't been developed in the best way that they could be. We think they could be stronger. So we've been working with the partnership on kind of a model where they would get out there and educate and have a consultant to support improvement in those, and then we would go in behind them and kind of ensure that those are developed the right way. So we've been supported by a consultant called Foursquare that both the county and the state and Downtown Columbia Partnership have used. We're actually going to be presenting some of the recommendations that they have at the next Multimodal Transportation Board meeting next week, and we're going to be having that revised plan out for public comment over the next month. So we do appreciate the question because you will be able to see more in the kind of recommendations that the partnership effort has put out related to the revisions to that plan, and we can get public comment on that. So we'd be happy to follow up with any one of the council members that is interested in learning more about what's in that plan. It's just we're finalizing it, and they are finalizing it right now.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner, because I'm very interested in that plan. Both of the transportation demand management plans are in my councilmanic district. So I'm wondering if, is Mr. Dodge on the, he is? Yes. Can he be elevated? So, all right, great. Mr. Dodge?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Can you tell us where Downtown Columbia is on its transportation demand management plan?
Sure. So, I will say that we're very happy with the strides we've made so far. The silver line, as you likely know, that the plan calls for a 15% reduction in SOV, single occupancy vehicle trips. Quite frankly, the silver lining of the pandemic and the push to both virtual work during the pandemic, sort of the proof that that works, has achieved that 15% reduction. And then additionally, as we return to the office with staggered schedules and compressed schedules, I realize I am a sample size of one, but my commute continues to be easier than it was pre-pandemic, whether it's me driving to work from King's Contrivance, me biking to work from King's Contrivance, or the occasional carpool with my wife, who also works in downtown Columbia. As you likely know, we did a lot of transportation-related events that we launched during the pandemic when people were hungry for human interaction, and we used those events to sort of start to change people's behavior in a safe way so that, hey, here's a fun thing where I'm out biking from Colorburst Park up to Blandare Park and back. Oh, this is actually really close and easy. I could do this to get to work. Does that help?
That helps, but I'm wondering if you have any numbers. Do you know how many people, for example, are walking to work? Or is that 15% reduction just people who are working from home?
It's a mix. I certainly see more walkers and bikers than I did pre-pandemic. We've been holding off on doing any sort of counts until we sort of hit a new equilibrium. So we're expecting that sometime in the first or second quarter of 2024, we'll start to actually do some monitoring to see, just how much traffic is generated per building. And that's one of the things we're working with Foursquare, as Bruce mentioned.
And if I could add something else.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Phil, yeah, so one of the things to kind of explain what the Downtown Partnership has helped us do in the Office of Transportation is with the scooter program. That was a company that was going to, provide something through a permit. They actually stepped in and provided a subsidy for that scooter program, as you may recall, so that we had spin and we were able to kind of get all the data. The biggest benefit to that program to our office was the data that we got and the 84, trips a day that we saw being taken, and the average was over a mile. So there was likely some commuting going on with that. I was personally out there monitoring things.
I would say there's more than likely.
Yeah. I was seeing things near the restaurants, et cetera. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Paul.
that heat map across the 29 pedestrian bridge from Oakland Mills certainly shows commute patterns from Oakland Mills into downtown. Likewise, you see a lot of activity around the hospital and the community college. And so, it shows that there is a demand for something other than just your single occupancy vehicle or your fixed route transit. So, and I don't know, Bruce, have you talked about the fact that we thought we had another person coming in for the scooter pilot, but they'd like a larger use area?
I have not mentioned that, no.
I was wondering why I haven't seen scooters laying around the sidewalks.
We did
fence,
put that. We
but
did
that's
put that
where
into
they
its
usually
work
work.
Used by commuters?
Yeah. Say again, Philip?
I was going to say, don't you mean scooters being used by commuters and folks going from their office to lunch and that
Yes,
sort of thing?
that too, yes. Yes, commuter scooters and scooters laying around on sidewalks, yes, both.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do go hand in hand.
Sorry. Bruce, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying that a lot of that was in the report that we did submit to council on the evaluation of the scooter program. So there might have been a line in there, but it was a while ago that we submitted that.
Are we not going to use scooters again? Or
We did do a
where are we
we did
at
the
this point?
solicitation, and we had no one respond for this year, so that's why you didn't see them
Okay.
around. And our debrief on that was that a few things that happened. I think the one company that was likely to try was already expanding out of the Annapolis area into Parole and other areas, so Anne Arundel County, ironically.
Mm-hmm.
But they were a little overextended, but there's probably some things that we could do to tweak that program to make it more attractive in the future.
Okay, I have some more questions, but I'll let Ms. Walsh go.
Well, can we go to Mr. Youngman and then Ms.
okay.
Walsh, if that's all right?
All right.
Mr. Youngman?
I don't have any questions.
All right, party on. Ms. Walsh?
I'm sorry, I was trying to pull up the presentation. I don't have it in here with me that you went over, Ms. Bella. Is it possible for you to put up the photograph or the map or chart depicting the transportation priorities or something, right? You had something that showed transportation priorities. It's not it looks like it's a chart that depicts the table. We have the chart in here, right?
Is it the significant transportation investments one?
Probably.
We will quickly go through it until we find the map that you would like. So,
Okay.
yeah.
But I think there are only two maps. That's probably it. Right? Okay, and admittedly, I was watching this on the cell phone on my dashboard at track practice in Burley Manor Middle School, but neither on that screen nor this do I see anything that indicates what is going on in Elk Ridge in this map.
So, you mind if I invite David up to describe the
Yes.
the reasons for the different things in here?
So to speak a little bit to what the decision-making process in terms of what was going into the map. Obviously
Sorry,
we're-
Mr. Cookson, can you just be sure to speak into the mic so the folks online can hear you?
There we go. Is that better?
Thank you.
So obviously we're dealing with constraints and limited space within a document. So we're looking at some of the bigger projects that were already established and in process in the county CIP, and projects that are regional in nature. So we made some decisions, both from aesthetic reasons, for what was going into the map. So in Elk Ridge, there's definitely one or two county CIP projects that are in queue or in process. So they're still there, but for the purposes of the general plan, we're trying to look at big things and looking further ahead as well.
So there's a couple other places that maps exist outside of the plan that reference some of the things that we're doing. So we have mapped all the CIP projects on our website for OOT that lists all of those. And then for the US 1 corridor, actually, we recently updated that to include state and county maps or projects with drop-down tables and everything else. So I'd also refer to those. But
Sure, but
we
this
are
is,
in the general plan, so.
Yes.
yep. And this chapter, and I guess I needed David to ask a question. Here it is, table 4.1. Oh, it is in here. This is map 4.2, is that right? Okay. Right. And so I represent District 1. I don't know if you guys know that, but if I went through and highlighted however many projects were on this single space line in pages 37 and 38 of this general plan, there were 5 projects total in my district, including Elk Ridge, which, as far as I can tell, is the first or second fastest growing district in the county over the last 20 years. This, to me, is an indictment of how this county approaches capital projects and transportation particularly. I am very thankful for the tour that we took on Route 1 earlier this week with DPZ, and Mr. Cookson did join us. So there were the two places where we talked about the Baltimore Metropolitan Council project to link some of the waterway or the water adjacentness. What's the lingo? Some kind of Patapsco facing, Patapsco focusing greenway that would connect us ultimately even to Baltimore City and the harbor. And then you mentioned, David, on that tour, something I didn't know about, that there was a project afoot to add safe pedestrian passage along Route 1 underneath the railroad tracks in historic Elkridge?
Yes, so the state is working on a study to evaluate how they could do that. They provided some detail yesterday, but I don't have all that information, but we can definitely provide you with a sort of more accurate update once we get our notes from that. But there's quite a few different types of projects all happening on that part of the US 1 corridor. As well, under US 1 is one of the things they're looking at, and further down at Rowanberry, one of the safety projects is adding sidewalk along Washington Boulevard and getting a good crossing across US 1 at the library. Because we've sort of recognized that was that was one of our 4 safety hotspots that came out of the US 1 safety evaluation. So we're strategically looking along the whole corridor based on our evaluations of where we're really putting a lot of pressure on the state to implement and deliver and pay for those projects to deliver safety along the US 1 corridor.
So we've also had other questions about this table and what it's supposed to mean. So David, correct me if I'm wrong, but this table is a list of projects that were in the last plan, that were including descriptions as they were in the last plan. There are examples there of what we would do to evaluate in a transportation master plan process, which is part of the recommendations of this general plan. And so there's reevaluations of many of these that would happen. So some of even the names on here, would likely change as a result of re-examination under a master plan process, where you look at the purpose and need of each project. And then there are major corridors in here that would then, result in many, many projects. I mean, if you go, please do go look at our website and what we've put dots on the map for along the US 1 corridor, because when you see that, you realize, a lot of the activities are going on that might be under a bigger umbrella of things. No, I don't think that, is that?
No, that's the bike
No, that's
coverage.
the
So
bike
under,
coverage,
Yeah, we're not on that either.
Yeah.
yeah, so we can
So,
put that link along.
so,
It's blue and red and green.
So, that's just wanted to put context for that table before you kind of got hyper-focused on, projects in specific areas. Not that you shouldn't be, but.
Okay, I mean,
I
right,
wanna
because
be-
I saw this term, was like, what is, so
Yeah,
is
we have
this is
got another.
different than what is reflected in Bike Howard or Complete Streets, or there's a third one, you have it up there? Walk Howard?
Yeah, so the Walk Howard is the functional plan for biking, and then we go the pedestrian plan and the bike plan. We also have the transit development plan that's happening here. And then there's sort of the road plans. So what's in here also reflects what's in some of the projects that are in the existing county CIP, what's in the state CTP as well. But as I said, we didn't show everything. So for the US 1 portion, we just recently, updated a US 1 interactive map that shows, hopefully accurately, the status of all the different types of transportation activities and projects that are happening in the US 1 corridor from 95 to the county border. And it shows the status of both state projects and county projects that are being delivered by our Public Works Department. And that shows a broad range of projects all along the US 1 corridor, both north, south, and central as well.
Okay, so does this 4.1 table, I thought that included everything in there. That's not everything? That's not multi-everything?
No.
That's just what?
So I think where we actually ended up writing this is it shows a selection of projects that met some of the criteria. They're not listed in priority order. So we're constrained by the space that we had available and trying to really present I mean, if we showed everything, it would just be a mix of a big blob of dots,
Right,
which is great, you know, in the big picture of things, but, you know, within the constraints of this document, and what we were trying to show, is trying to show really big picture, you know, what's out there, what's significant, too, in terms of transportation investments in dollars as well. So the US 1 corridor, US 1 itself, is treated as one long project. And so where the US 1 cross-section has evolved to is we've moved on from what was done in 2009, where they were proposing bike lanes on US 1, which the practice has really evolved beyond that. And the state of the art now is doing a shared use pathway along the whole corridor, and we're working both with the state, private sector, and us to implement that along the whole corridor, because we believe that's the best option and the safest option for both pedestrians and cyclists, and then intervening at intersections to provide safe places to cross. So strategically along the whole corridor.
Okay, I'm going to try one more time. I'm sorry. I really needed David to ask a question. So the project, what was the criteria for including these 1 through 39 in table 4.1?
So it's, you know, what's in the functional, there's things that were in functional plans, Walk Howard, Bike Howard. What are significant projects in terms of cost? What's in regional transportation plans? So small projects are not going to necessarily be in there because they're just the amount of space that we have available to work with.
So it is size, it's significance of project.
Yes.
Yeah, so this was a way to show some of the larger road projects because we already had our functional plans showing all the micro projects in Walk Howard and Bike Howard.
Okay, but I mean, I have a micro project, or I mean, I think you bundle all of them in 25, which is, you know, retrofit roadways and construct new pathways, neighborhoods, community centers, and schools in the US 1 corridor. But I struggled on this, so I was happy to see it was in the presentation, because it doesn't look right to me.
Yeah,
But
we
thank
have
you.
very much focused on that corridor, as I think, especially, you know, when I was here the first year, and the comments about, you know, that's a state route, like, where's our project? Well, you know, last year we added a project for US 1. It's a state roadway. We added county dollars to that, and we've gone after a federal grant, and we're hoping to hear back on that application process in the next month. That has planning funds to further scope out, you know, a whole corridor approach for many more projects. And that's not, you know, we know there's other parts of Elk Ridge and other corridors that need to be addressed as well. You know, we've also been focusing on the transit side. Haven't talked about that functional plan of transit development plan, so I'll wait until somebody asks me a question about that.
All right, Dr. Jones?
Good evening, everyone. So I don't have any questions on this particular chapter. I appreciate your presentation, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Staying on the Route 1 corridor, I think one of the questions that actually came up from a discussion earlier today is about the state's quick take authority, and especially its use along Route 1. So I think one of the challenges on county projects is that we obviously have to have the land before we can do any project on it. You don't want to design something if you don't own the land. You don't want to, I mean, you don't want to go into deep design if you don't own the land. But when it comes to the state projects, since they have the quick take ability along Route 1, is this something that they're utilizing? Are they utilizing it as a last resort?
Our understanding is that they are utilizing it. We have actually asked them in a couple instances where it's like, hey, could you make a case that, you know, a turn lane onto Route 1 is a state significant priority and you could potentially use it there. So that we've had discussions with them about, you know, where they can use that and where they wouldn't be able to. And so we've had discussion about, you know, whether it meets that criteria. And it was nice that, you know, they've said, yeah, something even right off of Route 1 would still be, even though it was on a county roadway.
So they're willing, open, and ready. It's really more of a question. I would presume from Governor Moore's comments that it's really more of a funding issue than it is a land acquisition issue. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
And then presumably the personnel design aspect of it as well. Do you think there's a holdup on that piece, or do you think that things are moving through design well, it's just getting the construction dollars?
There's lumpiness in all parts of the project delivery process, I'd say.
Okay. Because I think, I mean, one of the things I think we all had to do when we came in was adjust our expectations to the pace of project delivery. But it was, I think, hard to hear, you know, from the first priority letter that we have these priority intersections, and they're just now coming into existence as getting their safety improvements.
Right. Yeah, and we've heard recently of, just basically contractor issues where they might need to start with another contractor because of different, and I don't know on their end what that is, if it's a labor supply issue for their contractor or not. So yeah, I mean, that's part of what the state commission is looking at on, transportation revenue and infrastructure needs is like, is there something, that they need to rework in terms of their project delivery?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Young?
Back to TMD.
Sure.
Okay, or TDM, sorry. I was going to go there. So I feel like, two things. One, my understanding, and I could be very wrong on this one, that the I'm not sure if it's called the connector or whatever it is that's coming off of Route 29 into downtown Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
The need for it was going to a certain extent, be based on whether or not the TDM was successful, and if it was, that we wouldn't need to spend the $10 million or so on this piece of road, because we would have been able to keep the amount of traffic down. And I'm trying to think of, okay, so
That's not something I've
you haven't heard that? You don't?
That's
Okay.
just not something I heard.
All right.
Well,
Really leave
I've
it
also
at that.
not heard that.
All
I think
right.
it might be the third interchange that people are hoping to prevent.
There's yet another one?
Well, not anymore.
There's the one in the plan that's envisioned as literally going over Lake Kittamaqundi, which I don't, no one wants that.
That would be bad. So, I guess my question is,
The north-south connector that you're referencing is actually intended to bring people in and out of Meriwether Post Pavilion and the Meriwether District more quickly and take that traffic off of Little Patuxent Parkway.
right, which is necessary because there's more traffic. I mean, that was not ever in a plan before there was downtown Columbia. So that's the point.
Ironically, the
If
benefit.
there was less, I guess at one point there was some sort of, I remember in a presentation or something, there was some sort of contemplation that if there was less traffic, we wouldn't need to put these extra roadways in.
I mean, one of the biggest benefits that I could see being a resident down there is that the event traffic will go right in and out and won't kind of necessarily need to go into other places.
Well, that would be for all of us who live right down there. Okay, not just people who
Yeah,
live in
just- but
downtown
yeah,
Columbia,
that-
because I live
that
down there
event
too.
and direct access too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do these transportation demand management plans really work? Or is there some improvement that we could, can we improve them somehow? And if we can, what should we say about them in the
So,
general plan?
Yeah, go ahead,
That is
Phil,
a
before I do.
Bruce, you want to go first?
Nope, go ahead.
What I was going to say is, they definitely do work. It depends very much on, the city or town you are in and the infrastructure you have. Typically, in a transportation demand management plan, your two silver bullets are robust transit and paid parking. So I think you know where I'm going with this. And And if you do want to learn more about this, I'd love to sit down with our consultant and walk through our TDM with you. We have a great chart that kind of shows, what different interventions give you in terms of reducing SOV use. And once you don't have that option to robust transit and don't have paid parking, it really gets a lot harder to get people to stop driving alone in their car.
Well, yeah, we have not ever really had paid parking in Howard County. So
Exactly.
Right.
For those of us who love that, it's one of the great things about Howard County. I'm just saying, I recognize, Mr. Dodge, that you are not one of them, but yes.
Oh, absolutely. No. I'm as
Benefit
a end user, I absolutely love free parking. But as a result, I get to drive my car everywhere. If I, had to pay for parking, I'd be far more likely to walk or bike far more often.
Well, 97% of us have access to a car and drive our cars everywhere. And for better or for worse, and probably many of us in this room might say for worse, that is the way it is for a lot of reasons. And I think a big part of it is the way in which Howard County grew up. I mean, that's just the way we developed.
Oh,
And
absolutely. And so we're placing a grid on top of a suburban, sprawling suburban neighborhood or town. So obviously there's going to be some growing pains, and it's going to take a while to change those traffic patterns.
So
you are ready to talk, Mr. Gardner. Yes, right.
If I could add, I mean, so Philip's response was they do work, and I'd say it takes a lot of work to get them to work too. And that you have the constraints that Philip mentioned that do make there are challenges. But I mean, I think you're also seeing a different demographic of people moving in, thinking about like our kids' age of people that are moving into the area. I've met a few this weekend that are not commuting out of the county to work. They're living right in there. They're actually not going into an office building because they're working out of their house. But they, that ability to get on the bike and go up to the Starbucks at 3 o'clock on the afternoon and not get into a car. So just like spreading a little bit more of that, making sure we have the opportunities and some of the programs, infrastructure. I mean, the other thing that the partnership did was a walk audit of the downtown area. And there's a lot of recommendations that multiple property owners need to consider, the county, Brookfield, Howard Hughes, in terms of, what could be done on, their properties to just make sure people don't go, yuck, I don't want to get out of my car right here. I actually do want to,
Those are all great
stay
ideas.
there.
And
So-
just one last question on this topic, which means, and Mr. Dodge, unless somebody else has a question on this topic, you will be able to say goodbye. And this question is for you, Mr. Gardner, because this is the other TDM community, and that is Maple Lawn. Have we received, first, was something due from Maple Lawn regarding their TDM? Have we received anything from Maple Lawn in response to what was due? And do we know whether or not people who live in Maple Lawn work in Maple Lawn? Do they walk? Do they take any kind of transit if they do live in Maple Lawn and they happen to also live nearby, maybe their place of employment, APL, for example, but can't walk? Do we have the answers to any of those questions?
So if I could say we don't have very good information on several of those, but let me first give a background of the entities that we're talking about for Maple Lawn. So we're talking about there's an HOA as part of Maple Lawn. There's a commercial business district. There's both the property owners and everything and the businesses there. So we have been working with the HOA on some of the things that they're doing. We requested information from more of the commercial side to ask about what their plans are and how they were managing things. We have not gotten a response back, but we did send that during the pandemic. I think you followed up. So one of the things that we've been focused on in our office in order to kind of prompt that discussion is that we've worked with EDA and have had business, employer outreach to employers, as we've done in downtown Columbia, to see what they need. We're going to be following up on that in the near future. And we've also been developing transit plans that we will need to engage with both the HOA and the developer on. So as you may recall, we got federal funding for the flash service connection. You all provided funding in the capital budget for us to plan some bus stations in the area, so that planning has to happen at APL and at Maple Lawn and at downtown Columbia. So we have a consultant that will be meeting with the Maple Lawn folks, as soon as we can get in with them in the next month, and we're looking forward to having that conversation jump-started, and appreciate your, making that public, known about what their requirements are. So, we'll be following up with you as soon as we have those conversations, but we have not received another response back yet.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Ms. Walsh?
I want to ask about transit on the Route 1 corridor.
Sure.
You could tell me about Route 42. And I thought maybe Route 1 involved a prototype. Okay, yeah.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
So the other functional plan that we've made reference to is the transit development plan. So that is required by the MTA, and then they actually provide the funding to do that plan about every 5 years. We're just about finalizing our draft of that, and we'll have that out for your review, and we'll be looking forward to meeting with you all about that. We did a stakeholder engagement over the past about 8 months. One of the early term projects in that, or a couple of the early term ones, are things that we already announced in our budget. Takes a while to do plans, so sometimes the first things in the plan are things that you've got underway. But two improvements along the Route 1 corridor would include the extension of the 409 route of the RTA to potentially go all the way up to Lansdowne and connect into Halethorpe, which would be another connection to the Penn Line for Howard County residents. It would also connect up to the MTA bus service up at Lansdowne. So that is something that we are going to be going out for public comment on in the spring to do that. And then there's also a microtransit grant, the more of an innovative thing. It was an on-demand service. So we've been working on an RFP for that. We've been actually searching for vehicles and the combination of potentially electric vehicles, if we can get that to work with the distances and the charging and everything, and availability. So those things are underway to be rolling out hopefully within the next 6 to 8 months. And the one would be a pilot program with that on-demand service. So the state would fund about 50% of the first year of operation. We'd see if we'd continue it after that. And then the 409 service would be just putting into the RTA service. Another example of a route that came up high on the priority list for the plan was a connection directly between Columbia and Elk Ridge. So if you really don't have that direct now, it's been down towards Laurel and then up. This would be going more across the county. Right now, the one service that we have is the 501 that goes to Rundle Mills. That gets a pretty good ridership because of some of the employment opportunities over there. But it is a little deficient. It doesn't go to the airport directly. You have to transfer. So that's yet another like a midterm improvement that we're looking at in that transit development plan. So that's just a few examples. It's not an exhaustive list. It's a such as list. We look forward to following up with you once we get that final document with those recommendations, because it does come to council for a resolution to endorse that plan. So that's really why I need to come talk to you before we submit something.
Thank you.
Dr. Jones?
Yes. Quick question during the discussion. I heard a statistic of 97% of ridership, 97% of people in Howard County drive cars or something like that. Could anyone clarify? I don't know if that was from Councilmember Young or from Transportation, just if that's accurate, and if so, how that statistic came about.
Now I'm trying to remember which one of us said that.
I said that 97% of Howard County residents have access to a car. And I think you told that to us, Mr. Gardner, in the budget hearings, because it really really got my attention. Yeah.
Okay. We can go back to that number and figure out what.
But it's access, right? Just that you have access to a car.
I didn't say that. Yes.
Okay, so 97% of Howard County residents have access to a car. Is that
That,
is that what we're going with?
well, we will follow up with the right number, but that was the way it was portrayed, yeah, so we need to
Okay.
clarify that.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that 97% of Howard County residents own cars or actively drive cars, right?
That's
So
correct.
I was just trying to into the discussion of whether we're talking about public transportation, whether we're talking about walking, biking, scooters, ride share, what have you. Just trying to hone in on exactly what we were discussing there. That's all.
One of the more numbers I feel more confident about, because it's in our transit development plan, is that the RTA ridership, it's more like 60-some% that don't have access to a car, so it's more of that transit-dependent ridership.
Got you. Okay. Okay. I just want to, like I said, as soon as we start talking about numbers and percentages, it, raises my antenna, and I just want to make sure that none of us in the room are taking advantage of such statistics to tell a certain story and leave out the other part. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's under that.
Say I at the first back to school night last night, loads of people rode their bikes and walked to the school. It was such a nice night, and I was so proud of my neighborhood for all the folks who were walking. I was glad to not be the only bike there. It was exciting. I was wondering, and this is, I guess, it's like a multi-part question, but it's for DPZ on what you've heard, as well as Mr. Gartner, what you've heard, as well as Mr. Dodge. There's a lot of focus on commuting, but there are so many trips that people take beyond just commuting to work. It's going to the grocery store. It's going to meet a friend for coffee. It's it's caregiving trips, going to the doctor, going to pick up from aftercare. Can you talk about the importance of, and you can pick whichever one you want to go on, the importance of making sure that there's options for people to not just be in their car for those trips. If you heard from people in Howard County that they want options, that they want choice and freedom to not just be forced to either participate in very expensive car ownership, the cost of the car, the cost of insurance, the cost of gas, the cost of maintenance, what you heard from people in terms of what they're hoping for the future. What do they want us to become so that they have these options? Or did people even say they want these options? And then I guess the importance of the other types of trips reduction, not just commuting, but reduction of all trips and how that impacts travel and transportation around the county. So I guess we'll just sort of go in order. We can start with DPZ, then go to Mr. Gartner, and then end on Mr. Dodge.
Yeah, I mean, so I can say pretty much what I've heard and I continue to hear in so many conversations I have when I talk about the general plan and what it does and what it plans for over the next 20 years. The majority of the people I've talked to have said it is really important for us to reduce our dependency on vehicles. People want to walk, people want to bike, and they want to reduce their impact on climate, right? So they want to reduce vehicle emissions. They see it as a key component to how we can take some sort of personal responsibility for the future of our climate. So, I mean, I don't know if there's more specifics I can offer, but I mean, this is just generally what I hear from all age groups, especially our younger population, because we did have conversations with students as well, and it's really important to them.
I can only imagine. I mean, what's the cost of an average car these days? It's asked every new car because it has so much more than like a 1992 Honda Civic. It costs a lot more, so that's it really just increases the cost of single vehicle ownership. Ms. Bella?
Yeah, and I can just expand on that a little bit. I think you have to understand that people are not only trying to go to work, which is a big issue for access to support their ability to live, but also recreational use of walking systems and biking systems. Howard County has a fairly robust pathway network, and we've been working to expand it across the county. And people walk for pleasure in Howard County. It's a major activity that people partake in, and they do enjoy kind of leaving their house and being able to have the ability to access that trail system. And also, we are a suburban county in the fact that, except for some of our older communities, when we kicked off, we have very roundabout and circuitous routes. And so what could be a quick 5-minute trip for you, if there was a direct connection, turns into a 20 or 30-minute hike. So then you might be limited in your time and have to get in a vehicle to drop your child off at a house that's literally like visible. You can see it. You just can't get to it safely. So I think it's about that kind of lived experience for people in Howard County that they're seeking improvements, and we've heard that throughout the county in all sectors, that people, even in a neighborhood that they say, this is my established neighborhood, I want it to stay exactly this way, they're like, but I'd like a sidewalk, or I would like to be able to have a crosswalk to get there safely. So I think it's really about those kind of spot improvements that people want, and then tying those networks together.
Thank you. Mr. Gartner?
Yeah, so I just
Mr. Cookson?
speak on Bruce's behalf. So I follow up on a couple of comments about what we've heard. Outside of the general plan process, as part of our priority setting conversations we do every year for as part of the priority letter, we do surveys, we talk to people. So one of the primary things we hear is, I want access and safe access to the sort of my local destinations, getting to school, getting to shopping, but a lot of it is really around school. Those tend to be very short trips, 3 or 4 miles, 2 miles, 1 mile. So there's a great opportunity to be able to to intervene and shift trips away from automobiles to these 1 or 2 mile trips that can be definitely shifted to bike and walking. But it's building access, and safe access is the critical thing. So, that's the thing that we've really heard from a transportation perspective in terms of trying to shift trips away from automobiles to other different modes.
Thank you. And I can only, I think we've definitely talked before about how the advent of some of the e-scooters and e-bikes have actually sort of spread that radius out even wider for folks, that if you're sort of going analog, it's much narrower, but then it really expands your opportunities outward, especially in a hilly region like this. Mr. Dodge, can you just touch on, I guess, sort of what you're hearing through your process, and then also the importance of reducing the trips beyond commuting? So I would say
Sure.
pleasure or caregiving type trips.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up too much time. I do think downtown Columbia, as we evolve, can probably be a model for the rest of the county for this. But the things I'm hearing and the things I'm pushing are, this idea of park once, because it really is all close and you can walk. When we get scooters back, it really does make everything, like you said, that much easier. I know you all have copies of our pedestrian improvement plan, but I'm happy to distribute more. I think part of it is also, making walking welcoming and making sure it's, not scary to be a walker in any area in the county. And then finally, like you mentioned, e-bikes, and I hate to be the e-bike geek once again, but I know that you and I are at least aligned on this. It really is a game changer. And that's one of the things, our event Cranksgiving, aside from being a food drive, is again intended to get, people are biking in from all over Howard County into downtown with food drive donations. So it's to get them to think, oh, wait, I could actually do this for my grocery trip. I could, do this to go to the library. It's easy to put, 20 pounds of stuff on my bike and still ride.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
Thank you. And Dr. Jones, that information was obtained from the Howard County Demographic Overview that was put together by the Howard County Department of Planning and Zoning Research Division, and it's on page 13, where there's a chart that shows the vehicles available at occupied housing units in 2021. No vehicles available was 3.4% of households. One vehicle available was 27.5%. Two vehicles available was 45.8%. And three or more vehicles available was 23.3%. I think probably the most concerning number in here was that there are 192,866 Howard County residents in the labor force. 186,157 are employed, resulting in a 3.5% unemployment. Yay, Howard County. And according to the American Communities Survey conducted in 2021 by the U.S. Census Bureau, 98,980 Howard County residents work in Howard County. That's great. And 72,574 residents commute to work outside the county. That's not good. The 2021, and I was one of them for years and years. So I know what it's like to make that long commute. Worked in Baltimore and in Alexandria and in Silver Spring. That was what finally broke me. It was 29 that finally broke me, and we're going to get back to that. The 2021 ACS also estimates that 74,590 out-of-county residents commute into Howard County. So that's where those numbers came from. But in follow-up to that, Mr. Gardner, I know that this has been something that actually this is my biggest concern, and that is the commuting in and out of Howard County. And how can we cut down on the number of cars going in and out of Howard County? So bus rapid transit has been something that I think is the way to go right now to cut down on these number of trips. And I know you mentioned the flash service. I'm not sure that enough people know that the flash service is the bus rapid transit and what a wonderful system that can be, how similar it can be to a train and less like a bus because it just goes straight down the side of the road. And I am curious, at what point are we in, how close are we to actually bringing it to Howard County?
So we are in active kind of MOU development with Montgomery County, and we have federal funding to purchase buses that will extend the flash service during the peak hours from Burtonsville on up to Columbia, but it will provide a single-seat trip all the way down to Silver Spring. So that we are estimating would be starting in early calendar year 2026 because of the bus procurements and getting those things in place. And then, we'd be looking in the longer term, once Montgomery County gets more dedicated lanes, potentially by 2030 or the early 2030s, of having that be an all-day service. So one of the things that, we have to think about is state funding for those things. And we're actively pursuing that as we need to, make those regional connections.
Okay, I know that seems like a really long time to some of us. And I'll just keep my fingers crossed maybe that it won't take quite as long. But thank you for being such a proponent of this and helping to move it along.
Sure.
Ms. Walsh?
I don't even know.
David said I could skip him.
Yeah, I know.
And then as did Dr. Jones. And so if there's something that comes up, they'll just hop in during the rotation or
Okay,
let me
yeah,
know.
and I'm letting you know this is my last question.
Okay.
On, chapter 4. And it goes to a comment that I made in the first work session, which is there are a number of maps in this plan document, in particular today, map 4.1, where we reference census tract data, and it's not identified which census tract data. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instances, at least map 3.4, map 3.5, map 6.2, map 6.3, and map 4.1. Only 6.2 sites where it comes from, 2021, and Office of Transportation knows that I had a real problem with complete streets and that it relied on census tract data that was now 13 years old, right? And hasn't been updated. Those priorities were established based on census tract data from 2010, not 2020. So I'm guessing that's where this 4.1 comes from, but that means that we're depicting different things perhaps in this same document, because in some instances we're using 2010 data from census information, and in others, at least 6.2, we're using 2021.
I think part of the issue was that the 2020 census demographic information was delayed. So I think it was only fairly recently released. And so it's something that would be incorporated in the future as we update maps through our actual programs and implementation and the use of them. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, but do you know, for instance, on map 4.1, what census data, what's the date of that information depicted there?
From the equity emphasis areas?
Your microphone. And Mr. Gartner, can you mute yours? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the equity emphasis areas. So that would have been from the last official round of census. Yeah, so we've recognized that that data does need to get updated. So as part of our Complete Streets efforts, we're initiating the effort to update the data set to reflect the latest census numbers.
Okay. And I guess we'll see when you do that. That may, well, again, and depending on what significant means in Table 4.1, that may illustrate why what I see to be a community more deserving of infrastructure and amenities is not particularly reflected in some of the work depicted in these maps here. But that's all I have on motion, or whatever it's called, motion and transport. County emotion.
County emotion or emotion?
County, all of that, Bruce. County, Coton.
I thought she said county emotion for a second, because she was projecting.
I'm done. I am done. Yes, I know, I'm like, here we go. It's my last little red tab.
I had gone through my last one, but that gave me one, so it's the gift that keeps on giving. It was my understanding that sort of the equity emphasis areas came from the BMC VPI and the Baltimore Metropolitan Council Vulnerable Populations Index. I caught myself.
At least I didn't do it.
But it was my understanding that basically it was utilizing people who are, like, the percentage of people who are experiencing poverty within the tracts, non-Hispanic, non-white, Hispanic, limited English proficiency, people who identify as having a disability, who are elderly, or who do not have access to a vehicle. And that as that data was updated, that because it was stemming from this base criteria, that as it's updated, so we have a census, we get the data, we're able to map it 10 years, or I guess, do they utilize American Community Survey in that? But I guess my question is, my thought was that it would continue to flex and update as the data was updated.
Yes, I mean, I apologize that it's not done by now. We will update that map. It'll be updated before we end up scoring another capital project in the next capital budget that you see, because when we go through that process and if we have any new projects to recommend, we will score them for the equity emphasis areas, and we'll need to do it with the updated numbers. So it'll happen before the end of the year.
Okay, and is that something that we're waiting on BMC to do, Baltimore Metropolitan Council to do, or is that something that
we can do it?
Yeah,
We can do it.
It's the system that BMC developed, which is the federally compliant system as well in terms of transportation planning. So we took their system, but adopted it and used basically Howard County as the dominant things that we're dividing by. So they took the whole region.
Okay.
We're using our Howard County numbers to give us more Howard County specific.
Great, so we can control that update.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Love to hear it. All right. Ms. Young.
This is more of a comment than it is a question. And we've already discussed this, Mr. Gartner. So I just wanted to also let DPZ know that I am filing an amendment to include BWI in this chapter, County in Motion. It had been in 3 previous general plans, and it just, for some reason, got overlooked in the last general plan. So I think probably particularly the directors who are new to Howard County went back and looked at the previous general plans to see to get a feel for an outline. And I wanted to make sure that, given what has been going on with BWI in the last 7 years with the advent of Next Gen, which has put louder and lower planes in the air over Howard and Anne Arundel counties, that is discussed, and that it is that while there's not a lot we can do about it, what we can do about it is in that chapter. So I just wanted you all to get a heads up on that.
They kind of got one already.
Oh, big surprise. Did you send it to them?
No, you also announced it at the River Hill meeting.
There you go, and you watched it.
Yes.
Good for you. All right, then you know some of the other things I'm going to be doing. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm excited. Oh, let's see. I'm excited to see that we are. Yes, we are efficient. So I think that takes us. Why don't we take our 15-minute break now, and then we'll come back to implementation. Yes. 10-minute break. All right, we'll be even more efficient.